Hello everyone, it's Mariners Fanatic back in the YouTube video, and today is a sad day for baseball. The self-imposed deadline by the owners was met today, and a new CBA deal was not agreed upon before that self-imposed deadline. This means that so far, the first two series of the 2022 season will be canceled. Opening day against the Detroit Tigers was canceled, and then the next series as well. Currently, the Mariners are slated to start the season April 7th at the Minnesota Twins in Minnesota. However, that is likely to not be the case either. I've talked about it on my Instagram, Mariners Fanatic. If you want to go follow that, I post a lot more content on there. But I believe personally that the season will start either the last week of April or the first week of May. There are others that are more optimistic and some others that are even more pessimistic. They're mid-May to June. Based on what I've heard through the media, there's a lot of conflicting information. So I'm going to do a brief little breakdown of what the issues are. I'm not going to go into great detail on each issue, as I'm not 100% positive of all the numbers and facts that we're seeing in Twitter land and all that. So I'm just going to give the brief synopsis of each issue at hand from what I've seen. Starting off with starting the season on time. Personally, I think this could have been avoided if meetings had started to be held months in advance, right when the owners started the self-imposed lockout. I stress that again. All of this was self-imposed by the owners. People can blame the players if they want, but the owners imposed the lockout. They imposed the deadline. So think what you will, but that's the fact. With that said, there's been rumors that some of the smaller market teams, for example, Cleveland, Detroit, Oakland, Tampa Bay, potentially the Orioles, a lot of these teams see revenue losses in April because kids are still in school. And so they're totally fine with missing out on the whole first month of the season. That's why I think that some of this has been delayed. Some of the bigger market teams may have been ready to come to the table a couple months ago, but it's 30 teams you have to account for. And what works for the Yankees doesn't work for the Oakland Athletics necessarily. So that's another nuanced issue. The players may be united, but some of the teams within the ownership side of the disagreement may not be united. So as I said, I see a first week of May being the new opening day target, and I think that some teams don't have an issue with that. Obviously the players do because they'll be losing pay, but I think there's a lot of owners that are totally fine with that, and that is frustrating as a fan. Moving on, there was a lot of debate about 12-team versus 14-team playoff. Currently, we have 10 teams. I see the benefit in going to 12. I don't see the benefit quite as much as going to 14, and definitely not to 16 unless we're going to get into expansion team territory, which right now I don't see room for that in the MLB. Maybe in the future, but right now I just don't see it. So I am much more in favor of the 12-team playoff. It rewards the top team in each league and probably as well the second best record in each league with a first round bye. So it'd be 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 in a new form of wild card format. Then whoever wins advances to the divisional round versus the number 1 and number 2 seeds. And then whoever wins those, plays in the same LCS. That doesn't change. And then, of course, the World Series. So I'm okay with the 12-team format. I think that getting a bye isn't necessarily beneficial all of the way, as some teams ride a lot on momentum. That 6th seed could get hot at the right time and just run the table. I mean, the 88-win Braves won the World Series last year. So stuff happens, but it is a bit of a reward for the number 1 seed in each league and the number 2 seed in each league. 14 teams, I think it starts to get a little watered down. Obviously, the Mariners would have made the playoffs last year if there were 14 teams. 12, they would not have made it. unless it was top 2 teams from each division, which I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not going to speculate in details because we haven't really gotten a ton. I'm not sure what that's going to look like yet. Either way, it seems that they were getting closer to agreeing on the 12-team versus the 14-team playoff. They had already agreed on the universal DH in the past, so that was not much of an issue. They were talking about changes to the shift. I know a lot of players, specifically Joey Gallo and guys who can't hit away from the shift, complain about the shift. I see some value in the shift, but I do think it's a little bit overdone when you have Brandon Lau of the Tampa Bay Rays 10 feet in front of his right fielder, and then the shortstop is playing second base and the third baseman is playing shortstop. It's a little bit overdone. I'm kind of on board with you can still shift, but you have to stay kind of within a certain area, because I think having, again, for example, Brandon Lau 30 feet out into right field is not really, I don't know. There's something about that that's like, okay, this is weird. But you can see both sides to that. I'm not super strict one way or the other on whether I like or dislike the shift, but that's just one of the issues being talked about. There's a lot of other smaller, nuanced issues as well. A lot of them having to do with money, of course. The minimum salary is probably the biggest issue. Players are wanting an escalating minimum salary over the next 5 years, and although I agree with it, I think their numbers are a little high. They're kind of pushing it. The $700K that the league offered, I think is fair, especially coming from I believe it was $550 or $580 that it was prior. I think that's a bit of a jump, and I think that the $700 is fair, and the owner's kind of compromising there. The player's not really wanting to back down too much. The other issue with the luxury tax threshold, those numbers were not super clear. There were some reported numbers, but I'm not even sure if those are 100% accurate. But basically, the current tax threshold is $210 million, and the players were looking to bump that up to about $230, maybe a little bit higher, and the owners offered $220 with some escalators over the next few years. I'm not huge on upping the luxury tax too much. I mean, you saw what the Dodgers did last year by going out and acquiring Scherzer and Trey Turner and going way over the tax threshold. So I'm not huge on that. Yes, you get penalized, but I don't think the penalty is enough to discourage teams from doing that. I'm also not a fan of a cap. I don't like how it is used in the other sports personally, but that's just my own personal opinion. The luxury tax issue, I side a little bit more with the owners not wanting to get that up there too high. Probably about 220, 230 is where I would have it as well. But that's still an issue of contention. And then the biggest one where I probably don't agree with the players is the pre-arbitration player pool of money. I think it's a good idea, and in theory, I agree with it, but I think they've way overreached what they're asking for. I mean, when you come out starting at 120, you got to come down at some point. Granted, the owners weren't coming up very much, but I believe the lowest number that the players got to was $85 million for that pre-arbitration player pool. And that's still too high in my opinion. I think $50 million would have been fair to spread out amongst those players. The league countered at 30, so maybe once this deal is finally agreed upon, maybe it does end up being $50 million. And I see that as being pretty fair. But I think the players were kind of not overvaluing themselves, but overreaching on this one just a bit, especially when it's a new proposal and a very new idea, something that hasn't been looked at yet. There's a lot of things that go into play in that regard. So that's one where I kind of side with the owners. There are other issues at hand, but those are the biggest ones. A lot of them revolving around money, not too much having to do with the play, other than number of playoff teams, the DH, which was already agreed upon, and then talking about the shift and some other rule changes. In my opinion, I side with the players, about 70% to 30% owners. There's some blame to be placed on the players as well, but I also stand by them because they didn't like the agreement they had in 2016, and you don't want to run into another rushed agreement in this go-round and end up not liking it either, and then we have a bigger problem on our hands in another 5 years. So ultimately, I hope we can figure this issue out now so that we don't have any more lockouts, at least not for another 20 years maybe. So that's the hope for my side and kind of how I see it. I think Manfred is full of it. His press conference was not enlightening when asked a question about why they hadn't been meeting the previous 3 or 4 months since the self-imposed lockout was put on the table. He did not have a good answer at all. His comments were short and a sense of a little bit of passive aggressiveness or frustration, and I just don't really think that's appropriate coming from a top league official. People will argue about, players wanting more money and they're greedy too, and, there may be a little bit of validity to some part of that argument. But like I said, 70 to 30 for me, players on the owners. The players don't have a lot of leverage, and the owners are abusing that leverage that they have. So that's where I see the blame placed. You may agree or disagree with me, and that's fine. But I hope we can still discuss it in the comments and have a good conversation. I don't stray away from Mariners content too often, but this one affects the whole league and, of course, the Mariners. I was disappointed because I was hoping a deal could be made. I was not expecting a deal to be made, but I really want to get into some more off-season content with free agent signings and trades, and it does not look like that's going to happen anytime soon. So I know this was long-winded. Hopefully I was informative, and you guys kind of know what's going on as well, so we can talk about it in the comments. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Mariners Fanatic, out.